There's a saying among the preachers of old: come Monday morning, or rather, come every Monday morning, they begin writing their resignation letter. Not too long ago, I had this alluring lucid dream. I dreamt I cut the umbilical cord that kept me attached to the computerized world. This media saturated, augmented false reality, which we are ceremoniously indoctrinated into believing, and then dove into a pool. From underneath the shadow of swaying palms, I gazed up at the sunlit world, listening to the aroma of music as it penetrated, like the muffle from a seashell, into the chlorine blue, pretending like all of this, my bizarre interim with the truther movement, in its variants of patterns, never happened. Come Monday morning, every Monday morning, I sit and relish in that dream. I often contemplate what that moment will be like after I pull the plug, after I dive head first into the pool, and then float within the watery underworld, watching the bubbles rise past my eyes, just holding my breath, numbering the bubbles, feeling the sensational touch of water as it shrouds every arching curve of my body, and waiting to be left behind from the times I find myself in the world above. Come Monday morning, I think about that moment when I finally climb out of the pool and the sun kisses my skin. But that's only the first part of my dream. When I finally decided to come out in support of Hebrew cosmology some years ago, the burlesque rebuttals were almost immediate. I was making a mockery of the gospel, they said. I had become reprobate, they said. I'd never experienced anything like that before. I'd never experienced so many eyes pressed against me. Brothers and sisters in the faith whom I had thought were dear friends, whom I'd broken bread with and prayed with, gnashing their intellectual teeth and salivating. The fallout was ugly. There are people whom I will likely never speak with again. There was a senior pastor and his wife. They run a rather large church in Central California. The two of them followed me around on social media simply to hate watch. I don't know if they were sitting on the couch together, thumbing at their phones, or sitting in separate rooms clapping away on their computers, but they would simultaneously track me down, hoping to publicly shame what I was attempting to point people towards in the Bible. I'll never forget, he actually told me, and I quote, "Tears are flowing from Yah's throne because of me." Excuse my description, because I don't know what else to call their behavior other than psychological self-flagellation. They were pleasuring themselves at my expense. It was just sick and disgusting and slimy, coming from their spiritual pay grade. Coming out and publicly writing about it, day after day, that was a difficult time. My best friend, we attended the same high school together, as did my wife. We joined the army at the same time. We served and led ministries together. He was my best friend. I loved him dearly. I still do. We did almost everything together. We were practically attached at the hip, he and I. We would sit around smoking cigars and sipping scotch late into the night, discussing anything on the table, from conspiracy talk to theology. You know, the furthest pastures of biblical inquiry. We weren't afraid to go there and look into it. So he also looked into it, flat Earth, that is, soon after I threw my weight behind it. It certainly interested him. He was intrigued. I had actually hoped, I really believed for a time, that he'd come on board, that we would take this venture together like everything else. And for specific reasons, he couldn't. Or rather, he chose not to follow along with me. He just couldn't take that path. And so I started along on my own. About that time, the fallout happened. Please understand, there never was an argument between us. Though I'm certain I said some hurtful words. But I think it became abundantly clear that he could no longer be associated with me because of my views. I think we all understand that this isn't really a debate about the shape of the earth, but where we see ourselves in the world, and more importantly, how we view the world itself, the shape of humanity. All things considered, I think our continued friendship became an insurance issue. The fact of the matter is, I miss him. There's such a void in my life, recalling all the faces lost. It feels like I left a trail of breadcrumbs, hoping they might catch up. But in reality, those crumbs were bits and pieces of me. I think of the fallout, people whom I once broke bread with, the meaty discussions we held over God's word, and then the venomous reaction after my coming out about Hebrew cosmology. And I don't hold it against them. I'm on this pilgrim journey now, my wife and I together, desperately seeking out the celestial city, like a narrative from Pilgrim's Progress. And should any one of them race to our side again, I will most certainly embrace them. I guess I forgot to tell you about the second part of my dream. Essentially, it goes something like this. I climb out of the pool and then turn on the television. Perhaps it's not an actual television, but far more likely the furniture which fills the memories of my mind. But it's all there on the flickering screen. The alpha waves which serves as the witch doctor's potion, and the grand-scaled psychodrama which drowns the whole world in the spells of their electronic programming. I see a demolition of towers while ISIS looks on. I see a field and a pentagon-shaped building without plane wreckage. I see the death camps. I see murdered children who sing before millions of televised audiences. Crisis actors who have a habit of getting cast in various mass shooting events. I see trails of chemicals vandalizing the skies over the bread and circuses of sporting arenas to mock the very citizens who never cared to look up. I see people lining the pharmacy aisles to receive their annual poison. I see our worshipped celebrities and the very world leaders we vote for and place our confidence in throw up their allegiances to Satan before our very eyes. I see astronauts on wires, the green screen of space, moon props, flat horizons, a wheel in the sky. I see an entire Earth covered by the surface of water, sea level. I see the wave of the hand, the pigeon in the sleeve. I see the stage, the performance, and the script. I see my friends and loved ones mourning for phantoms. I see the Zionist conquest of the world. I see the mystery religion as a corpse exhumed. I see the damnable lie of the ages fleshed out in our conversation. I see Protestants shaking hands with Jesuits. pastors spoon-feeding a gospel of lawlessness, generations of men forsaking Sabbath worship, entire congregations openly worshiping a counterfeit spirit, the filth of Platonism bleeding from our doctrine, and the signposts ahead suggest we're closer to Rome than ever. I see what so many of you see, and I'm tired. I'm sick of it. I am weary of the satanic media's groundbreaking news story being that I am fake news. And yet there are things I've seen, what so many of us have seen, that simply cannot be forgotten. I gaze into the pages of God's Word like so many of you do, and come every Monday morning, see what very few are willing to see. And yet it's all there. Mystery Babylon surrounds us. It's a Tuesday morning, and I sit in the office of the senior pastor. Yet another church my family has been visiting. It has become routine for me to schedule a private meeting with the pastor rather early on. Before investing our time in any congregation, I feel it's best to expound upon my beliefs and let the things I've seen be known, and just so that there are no surprises. Let the pastor kick us out early if need be. And so I told him some of what I've seen. Only short clips and frames, really. But where do you really begin? Where is the starting line? Do we tell them about the 9/11 demolition or the moon landing lie? Or do we go much further back, thousands of years even, to the very first lie? Do we go to the garden and begin from scratch? He had already looked me up online. He knew all about me. Come Monday morning, I had contemplated pulling the name Noel J. Hadley offline. I considered sending in my resignation letter to the world. He looked me up on a Monday and refused to believe any of it. The senior pastor examined me. He looked me square in the eyes and asked, if I was to continue in his congregation, could I set that part of me aside? He wanted to know if I could divide my soul. When I dress myself in a tie and coat come Sunday morning, could I leave the part of me who wishes to help people see the great delusion in the closet? Could I not be weird about the world around me, he said. Could I be normal? He looked at me unblinking as I considered his offer of friendship. I thought about my dream of the pool. I remembered the saying among preachers of old. I thought about the prophet Jeremiah, who warned Judah of the Babylonians, who pleaded with them to cast out their idols, whose entire ministry was defined by tears. I thought about Jeremiah after he was taken into custody, a prison cell which was, rather ironically, adjacent to the temple in Jerusalem. It must have been Monday morning in prison, because the prophet wrote, I have become a laughingstock all day long. Everyone mocks me. For each time I speak, I cry aloud. I proclaim violence and destruction, because for me the word of the Lord has resulted in reproach and derision all day long. Jeremiah 20:7-8. It must have been Monday morning because the prophet sent in his resignation. To this effect he wrote, Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more of his name. But then Monday evening rolled around, as it often does, and after careful though tormented contemplation, the lonely man of God concluded, Then in my heart it becomes like a burning fire, shut up in my bones, and I am weary of holding it in, and I cannot endure it. The senior pastor seemed to stand outside of time as he stared me down, unblinking, waiting upon my answer. I thought about my friends whom I broke bread with, who snarled their self righteous teeth. I don't hold it against them. I do dearly miss them. I had hoped to hide the weariness, the unending loneliness in a world numbed by the spell of grand wizards. And I considered my beautiful dream of the pool. But this was a Tuesday morning, after I had declined sending in the resignation letter. And so I told him what I have seen, what I have heard, and what I have read about the reality of the days we live in is something I cannot look away from. Its wardrobe is as much a part of me as his words are planted in my heart.